call the Romeo Planning Commission meeting to order at an earlier time than normal. And first order of business tonight is the roll call.
Fowler,
Yes.
Luther, Trapp,
Here.
Trubovich,
Here.
Guzmano, Grandstaff,
Here.
Stegner, and Edwards.
Here. Next item is the approval of minutes from the meeting of May 11th.
So moved. Second.
Motion and a second to approve. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item is the public forum, and I don't see anyone here that would be participating in that, so we will move on to the next item, which is the agenda. Are there any changes, additions to the agenda?
Yes, I'd like to, if you don't, if the chairman doesn't mind, I'd like to add the review of the Mitt TV. Or not the Mitt TV, it would be the Walter Sheets Drive, number 6 property, formerly WBRW building.
Okay. And this would be to discuss the possibility of that property being used by Mitt
By
TV?
Mitt TV, correct.
And what would it take
Um,
to make that happen?
Yes.
Okay. All right, we have a request to add an item to the agenda. I guess I'll take that in the form of a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries, so we've got 2 items on the agenda. The first item on the agenda relates to the L&L Products proposed purchase of village property at 33 and 33 Mile Road. There are 2 parcels that are detention pond at this detention basin. Turn this off.
Yeah.
Based on what I know about the situation, the Planning Commission is charged tonight with deciding whether or not the use of those 2 parcels, should they transfer to L&L Products, would it be proper for an access road to be added to that property so that they would have access from 33 Mile Road to the L&L property as shown on the proposals that came in our packet. And from what I can see on the map, I don't see any reason that it will not satisfy the Romeo Village ordinance. So at this point, Bill, I'd ask you to add anything else to that that I left out.
No, I don't think so. That was a result of, been to working with the village with respect to looking at a secondary access for our employees to L&L. And this idea came up, and of course, working with the village, they wanted us to come see you. And on top of that, I've talked to the Macomb County Road Commission. Robert Roth, I believe is his name. He's the, Robert Bush. He's the person that's in our area up here. And he verbally said that, he would review it, and he was in favor of it, as long as we, of course, constructed it such that it was within the guidelines of Macomb County Road Commission. So that was the second sheet that we had changed, where we had the deceleration lanes, and
Right.
so that it would be done proper to their standards.
Right.
Our civil engineer did that. And so, in the last meeting, we were, I was told that to come see you guys and also provide that letter of what our intentions are. Was the advice that she would purchase the property. And so that's what the letter's all about.
Okay.
Mr. Clark, have you had a chance to review?
I looked at what was provided. I have a copy of the letter that's dated October the 20th, and there were 2 drawings attached. I've looked at those.
Okay. Everything?
Well, you have a couple of issues going on. One, and I think most, if not all, the issues are appropriate, as Mr. Edwards said, for the Planning Commission to consider. One is does the village want a road there? And if it's a good idea, that's what planning commissions do, is review things and decide whether this is good planning for the village. And then the other, right now it's village property, these two parcels. And so I think it's appropriate if the planning commission has a recommendation, either in favor or in disfavor, but in any event, a recommendation as to whether or not the village should sell the property. And so I think that's proper for you to consider that as well. That would be a recommendation, either, as I mentioned, favorably or unfavorably, but I think that's proper for you to consider as well. Not the terms are up to the council, but whether you think this is a good disposition of village property, you're dealing with public property, I think it's appropriate for the planning commission to consider that.
Thank you. Any comments from planning commission members?
I have one. On the usage of this road, would this be privately used by L&L Product? I'm seeing
Yes.
it going next to another lot here. And Mr. Carp just brought up a good point as far as, you know, do we want another road off of 33? And if we do, will it be solely used by L&L? So you just said yes.
That's correct, and it's also a secondary emergency access, you could say.
So would it connect all the way through your existing entrance? That road
Well,
would
it connects to our parking lot.
to your parking lot, but that parking lot connects to the other side coming
That's
off
correct.
Powell Road too?
That's correct.
And that's-
Well,
Connects on
McLean.
McLean, is it?
Yeah,
McLean Drive,
Drive,
right.
yes.
And that's a private drive also, correct?
McLean?
No,
no,
from
McLean.
McLean to onto your property.
It's used by the industrials
Right.
Yeah,
buildings?
it's part of the condo, as they call it.
Right.
It's like a roundabout at the end there
Yeah.
with a driveway that goes
Yes.
into your property.
So the village would have usage of this property? Village machinery, materials, whatever? Private drive? You got the word private in my mind here.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're gonna, obviously, we would maintain the road, but, yeah, they would have access to it.
And how about
Of
that
course.
pump that's there?
Well, we would maintain the pumps. In other words, as we took ownership of the land, we would take ownership and maintenance of the pumps.
Is there a compensation that we should?
That's not up to us.
That's up to the council?
That's up to council to determine any values that are exchanged.
But I do think one of the issues that have been raised, a couple of them with respect to that, is it a public road or a private road? If it's a private road, then the village is not going to have any responsibility, as was mentioned, to plow it or maintain it.
Correct.
Which is often the case and I don't think this is, I don't think this development's a condominium, is it?
It's
Is it
called-
a
yeah,
site,
it's called
it's a site
condo, site
condominium?
condo, yeah.
Okay. And so typically, the municipality, or in this case, the village, doesn't maintain what are called common elements in condominiums. You have, if roads need to be repaired or snow needs to be plowed, the village doesn't go on private property and do that. So that's an important consideration that was mentioned. And then with respect to the pond itself, it appears that the size of the pond, and I'm not an engineer and I'm not going to try to be one now, it appears the size of the pond that actually would hold or retain water is going to remain pretty much the same.
Yes, sir.
And so you, depending on what your comfort level is, or ultimately the village council's comfort level is, whether the village engineer should check to make sure, because the pond or that area was put in for a purpose, to receive the stormwater runoff. And you want to make sure that if you transfer the title to the property, that same purpose is going to be able to be fulfilled. And so whether you think that bears further scrutiny, I'll leave that up to you, but that would be, or ultimately the village council, but that would be a concern that I would have. And then with respect to the offer to maintain the pumps or the pump, I don't know if there's more than one on there or not. In any event, and the detention pond itself, I think periodically it needs to be mowed. I'm not sure. I don't think it happens maybe all that often, but I do think there's some additional maintenance apart from the pump. In any event, if the village transfers the property, I think there should, at the same time, be an agreement with L&L Land Company that they will maintain the property, the detention pond. And if they don't, that the village can go on there and do it itself, and then assess that cost against the property as it would a property tax. So that, I'm sure L&L is gonna do it, but it might not always be owned by L&L, and so the village needs to protect itself. You don't wanna start doing things for free on property you don't own.
And that would be a part of the purchase agreement.
Right, right.
Okay.
One thing that I thought of in looking at this and going out this afternoon and actually looking at the property and the parking lots and the number of cars involved, having an access on 33 Mile Road would cut down on congestion into the village with traffic coming from the north or from the west to, it would perhaps cut down on the amount of traffic that we may have in the village.
Yeah, at first glance, I can't see anything but advantage
Yeah.
to the whole concept. And as Mark mentioned, it is a situation where the village is potentially going to transfer public property to a private entity. And as long as the people who ultimately make that decision obtain fair value for the village, it certainly sounds like a very agreeable situation. There was one question, Bill, that came up before the meeting started, and that was the selection of the west side of the detention basin versus the east side of the detention basin. Was there some?
Why did you choose that?
I think it was purely due to the way it fit and everything else.
Okay. I don't know that it's certainly of no concern to us as long as it,
I think that's just what I think we thought was the best fit.
okay.
And a lot of that I leave up to the site engineer as well, because I'm not a road,
No, I'm not. Right.
because we did, out of due diligence, had him also recheck all the calculations, at least for the design as it states on that drawing, to make sure that it would be proper for the condo. Because also from the L&L side, to Mark's comment, we want to make sure that we don't get a pond that's not deep enough or not wide enough or,
Right.
you know, that kind
Right,
of thing.
and you don't want your parking lot to not drain, so.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's certainly a mutual interest that everything work properly, but you still need to cross Ts and dot Is. But
Exactly.
yeah, you're not really working at cross purposes, I don't feel, based on what's presented and what you're reviewing.
Does anyone have any other questions or comments? If not, I would entertain a motion to send a recommendation to the village council to enter into negotiations to transfer ownership of the detention basin to L&L Land for values that they both agree on.
So moved.
Second?
Have a motion and a second. We'll get those. Okay, any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
There you go.
Dave.
One more step.
Yeah. All right, thank you, guys.
Thank you. Second item on the agenda. Mr. Fowler, maybe you can describe
I haven't been in communication with Ruth Heidelberg, who is the director of Mitt TV. And talking with some of the members in the community, Bruce Township and the village, we'd like to see the old WBRW building used again as a TV station for that hub. So, it came up in the village council meeting one time that to bring it to the planning commission and have the discussion here and have our recommendation sent back up to the council. So that's when I had contacted you. And I had also talked to Mr. Clark, and this is the place to start that discussion.
Well, since WBRW has moved out, the building was for a long time unoccupied.
Correct.
And if I recall, the
Parks and Rec.
is being used by the current, what do we call
Parks and Rec.
Parks and Rec.
Exercise programs.
Right.
They're using half of the building
half of
currently.
it? Okay.
And the other half, at one time, we did go through the building, Mrs. Heidelberg and myself and Christine and Bob. And we had also talked with Claire as far as the usage of that building.
Mhm.
Claire's the director of Parks and Rec, and she had no problem coexisting with them at that time, but in the interim, things didn't happen with the Mitt TV, and there was a whole lot of misunderstanding, confusion that went on. So we're back here at this situation of a housing situation for Mitt TV, and like I said, it would be a great spot since it was used as the TV station for the village, Bruce Township, Washington Township, and the location, it suit the surrounding areas perfect as far as where it was located because of the activities.
Mr. Clark, is that building owned by the Village of Romeo?
It is, yep.
Okay.
Village owns it outright.
Okay.
Now, operating in that village at the time was a consortium, correct?
It was built specifically to be a television studio, and once constructed, it was operated by the Tri-Community Cable Commission, which was comprised of Bruce and Washington Townships and the Village of Romeo. I think a couple of the issues for the Planning Commission to consider, whether you make any decisions or recommendations tonight, certainly is at your pleasure, but it's zoned residential. And as the Planning Commission knows, you can have various municipal uses in a residential zoning. You can have recreational facilities, churches, which aren't necessarily recreational, but there are non-residential uses permitted in a residentially zoned area. One of the concerns, or at least one of the issues I think you have to address, if it's occupied by an entity such as the Mitt TV or any other similar entity, you really have a commercial use in a residential zoning, and you have to ask yourselves whether that's appropriate. And then, which is not really within your bailiwick, but as part of the overall consideration, that one of the, I guess, the operating functions when it was operated by the Tri-Community Cable Commission, things were different in the cable television industry. At that time, it started out as Heron Cable and it went to Comcast, and Comcast paid rent, and they also provided other things of value, cameras and equipment, and they did things that they no longer do and they're no longer required to do. The point of that is that because it is village property, it is owned by the municipality, if there's going to be consideration for essentially a private use, then I think the community, not only the Planning Commission, but ultimately the Village Council has to look at, do we allow a use like that, essentially a commercial use in residential zoning? And if we think it's appropriate because it has a public function and there are things there that are appropriate for that type of a use, I think the village should be compensated at market rates for the value of the space.
Right.
And again, I don't know that the Planning Commission insinuates itself into monetary or financial matters, but I think those areas that I mentioned are appropriate for consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Would Mitt TV be considered a commercial enterprise?
Well, I think so, because it's not a governmental operation. It's not operated by the village or Bruce or Washington Township. It's a private entity. And so, but that's the discussion that you can have. But my knee-jerk reaction is that it's a business.
Although I've been on this board for a long time, I don't recall if I was here at the time that building was built and that process was started. But I wonder if there was any, were you? Okay, I just wonder if if there were discussion at the time regarding the use of that, the use being in a residential area, or if it just seemed like a good idea since it's right next to the Parks and Rec building.
I don't recall there being a specific discussion about the use at the time it was constructed. It may be, as you mentioned, that, well, we've got this building where you're meeting tonight, which had a smaller footprint at that time as well. There have been additions to this building since, and I think one of the things that made it easy and maybe avoided the discussion of whether it was appropriate, at the time that building was built, WBRW was operating on the stage in the gymnasium in this building. And so it was more, I think, considered, well, we're on the stage here.
Right.
Instead of moving into a tent outside, why don't we move into a building outside? And so I'm not sure there was any actual discussion or consideration about, well, gee, we're doing this in a residential neighborhood. They were already doing it in a residential neighborhood.
Right.
Now they're just doing it under a different roof. And so I suspect that discussion wasn't had, but I don't know that.
I suspect that's true. But should the process move forward, it would seem that Mitt TV at some point could petition the Planning Commission for a special land use.
Yes, because I think there should be a formal process to consider
And then
that.
we ask the 8 questions that we always
Right.
ask and determine whether or not
Right,
this would be permitted.
right.
But then we get into somewhat of a cart and a horse situation. I could see Mitt TV questioning whether or not it's worth pursuing something like this. What if we go through all this and the Planning Commission refuses to grant special
Yes,
land
yeah,
use?
exactly, and you have the other potential irony is that it was built to be a TV studio. It was really a very limited, almost singular purpose building when it was built.
Right. And I know since then, there was one attempt by some interested parties to perhaps move the police station.
That's been discussed,
in that
yep.
building, but that never gained any traction. So, Zach, I'm not sure what actions.
Well, I just wanted to bring it up, and
Right.
just to get the conversation started.
Well, good.
And, we can table this till the next meeting, it'd be fantastic. That way we can put together more information. We could ask Mitt TV to possibly come if they would like to
Watch
petition.
out. Yep.
It gives us a chance to do a little more research, to look the building over. And you're absolutely correct, it was designed for a TV station.
Right. Okay. Hi, Jim.
So yeah, just wanted to have that discussion and get it started, because the ball needs to get tossed out there.
Yeah.
It's out there on the court.
I'll sit up there next to Cindy.
Jim, when we communicated, I'm not sure if you knew that we were going to start a half hour early tonight.
No, I did not, no.
Okay.
Just didn't want you to show up on time.
Okay.
Well, now that they got everything done without you. Motion to adjourn.
Yeah, your turn, Jim.
Yeah, would you give the motion to adjourn, please?
Oh, we're kidding. Now we're kidding.
Is this on? I can't- Sure, I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Well, in a moment.
Oh.
Let's formally end the
You're really
discussion.
anxious, aren't you?
Formally end this discussion regarding Mitt TV and the now empty TV studio. we will table this discussion until a later date. I don't think we need any action on that. We'll just stop it at that point. And at that point, Jim, we would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Sure, I make a motion, we adjourn.
All in favor, please say aye.
Another time, there we go.